Before I came out, I had all the support I could ever need. I kind of disappeared from my family, from everybody that I knew, because I really didn't have any kind of support. And so I fell into a kind of a dark hole for a while. Music really kind of saved me through a lot of times in my life. I had this calling. I'm going to follow through with this calling my life. I have been blessed. I had not lost my salvation. I had not lost the love of God. If I can write a song that moves people, moves a person, helps them to deal with whatever they're going through, or lifts them up, or brings a smile to their face, or makes them dance a little bit, then I feel like I'm fulfilling the calling that I had when I was 10 years old.
Welcome to America Lost and Found. We're taping from Studio 770's own Blueberry Suite studio. Now, America Lost and Found, it sounds like it's going to be about missing people, doesn't it? Well, that is the inspiration for America Lost and Found. My sister Gina disappeared October 17th, 2000. And I've had a lot of experience of meeting families of the missing throughout all these years. But I don't want my whole life to be about missing, everything that I do to be about missing. And the biggest thing that my sister taught me was to not miss out on my own life, missing her. And so this show is about anybody, which all of us lose throughout our lives. If we're breathing, we're going to face loss. But loss doesn't have to sink us. It doesn't have to sink our ship. It doesn't have to sink our mission. It might give us a new direction for our mission or our reason for being, but it doesn't have to sink us. So the guests that I have on here have found ways through their losses in their lives to go on and to find other ways to show up and be who they were meant to be in the first place. So I want to welcome Gary Floyd. Gary Lynn Floyd has been a friend of mine for a very long time. We can never remember exactly how we met. So I'm thinking we've just known each other forever, and that's why. And
I like that. I like that.
and so I would like to bring Gary in. Gary, I don't see your bio, even though once but Gary's been a singer-songwriter since he was probably born, and he started playing piano when he was very young and doing it well. And he was already a recording artist and touring when he was in high school, I believe. And Gary made some dreams come true for me because I always wanted to sing with Vince Gill, and I think Gary is on that level, and I got to sing with Gary. And
Wow.
so he made that dream come true for me. So
Compliment.
Vince, eat your heart out.
I love Vince Gill, so that's a very wonderful compliment. Thank you.
You're welcome. So Gary, I just really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you being part of my life. I appreciate you being part of my story. And I'm excited about tonight. I'm excited about talking to you because I know I'm going to hear things from you that I haven't heard before. And I just want to hear how you have weaved in and out of the losses in your life to create the beautiful life that you've made, the colorful, beautiful, authentic life that reaches out and touches people every day.
Thank
So,
you.
wherever you want to start, I know I went into a big long diatribe, but wherever you want to start, Gary, you start.
Um, I feel like a cat sometimes because I feel like I've had several lives in this lifetime, in this one lifetime. Um, and if there are a couple of times when I've gone through pretty extreme loss in my life. And I'll just start with the first time because it was before not right before I met you, but several years before I met you. Um, And like you said, I grew up, I learned how to play the piano when I was 4. I grew up singing in church. I was raised in the First Baptist Church of Conroe, Texas. I was born in Houston, grew up in Conroe, youngest of 4 kids in a family. Always was just gifted with music. I started picking out melodies um, on the piano. My older sister would rehearse her songs for hours, and then I would go in and kind of pick out the melody. And I was much younger than her, but she would go to my mom and say, "Gary's bullying me." And so um, I was that kid. And I started singing in church. Um, I went to Estes Park, Colorado when I was 14 years old. And they had a thing called the National Talent Competition at the Christian Artist Seminar. I wound up winning that. Um, and as a result of that, I just started playing in churches, mostly Baptist churches around Texas and Oklahoma, and just in that area, the South and the Southwest, um, and did that through college. Um, and when I graduated from college, uh, I came out of the closet. I was outed out of the closet, but I would have come out on my own. Um, but I was kind of nudged out by Christian people that thought they were doing their Christian duty of, like praying for me, or, having other people pray for me. And that began the first loss I had. I had graduated from college. I was writing songs. I had written a song for a guy named Steve Archer. He's a contemporary Christian artist, and he recorded a song that I wrote with a couple of friends of mine called "If You Were the Only One." And it went to #1 on the Christian charts. And I had a publishing deal, and I was next in line for the record deal. And then everything came crashing down. That's not the place to. Uh, it's not the place to have support when you're a gay kid and you're in that Christian world. I'll just keep talking. So if you want me to kind of slow down so you could ask me a question in the middle, then I can do that too.
Just keep
um,
going. Just keep going.
and it was really, really difficult for me. I felt like the world knew. Um, it was only my little part of the world, but it felt like everybody in the world knew. I didn't have any support really from my family. It wasn't that they kicked me out or that they, abandoned me, but they didn't know how to deal with it because of their upbringing. And after all these years, I can kind of look back and realize that it felt to me like I was the only one going through it, but I realized that, my parents were going through it with other people that were Baptists that were looking at them saying, well, all your other kids turned out fine. What happened to this one? And my brothers and sisters that were, kind of dealing with it on their own too. But I didn't deal well with it at first. Um, I just I kind of disappeared from my family, from everybody that I knew, because I really didn't have any kind of support group. And if I did have support from individuals, I just didn't feel it or couldn't see it. And so I fell into a kind of a dark hole for a while. And I met a guy that became my first boyfriend, and he was like, "There's a open mic night on Monday nights at this cabaret, and you should just go, play, go and show up and play at the open mic and see what that's like." And so through this, music really kind of saved me through a lot of times in my life. I never stopped playing music, and I went and played at the open mic night on a Monday night, and the owner of the club said, we've got an opening on Tuesday. Would you like to play? And I didn't know any. I mean, I knew a little James Taylor, and I knew a little Kenny Loggins, and I knew mostly contemporary Christian songs or hymns or whatever I had played for my whole life up until that point. So I started learning new songs and dove into that world. and like I said, I think that music, I just kept showing up. Um, and over the time that I played there, I realized that, the ministry that I had in churches didn't really go away. It just kind of shifted. I remember when I was like 9 or 10 years old, they have the altar call. And so I felt like I had been called to ministry, but I knew even at that young age that it wasn't like being a minister of music at a church. I mean, it was just kind of using what I'd been given and to lift people up. And I realized, after a while at the piano bars that that was still happening. I wasn't singing Christian music anymore, but I was singing music from my heart that touched other people in their heart. And so even though I had lost everything, I began to kind of um, form a new family and make new friends. It was not smooth. I did a lot of stupid things. I, experimented with every drug you could think of, probably, and some I didn't even know that I was, what it was. Um, but I was, I was just trying to kind of pull it together and keep going and keep showing up. And the way that I kept showing up was through my music. And so I really, I'm grateful that I got that gift because um, many times in my life, it helped me to, uh, I don't know, I think I probably was singing to myself most of the time um, as I was singing to other people. Um, but it's not like a horrible, sad story because as a result of that, and being in that cabaret, I met a guy named Jim Caruso, and he had a jazz vocal trio called Wise Guys. And so he asked me to be a part of the trio. He had lost one of the members of the trio, and we wound up. Um, we had a lot of opportunity in Dallas, and then he moved to New York, and I spent a year in New York while I was singing with them, and we did Carnegie Hall with Rosemary Clooney, and we did the White House when the Clintons had their first state dinner, and we went and sang there, and so well, a lot of things that opened up for me after that loss, um, and I began to kind of get myself back together and have opportunity, but. I guess that's what you're talking about is people who've gone through loss and then have kind of rebounded and
Mm-hmm.
pulled back together and had opportunity. And I guess all I can say is that it was just me being stubborn enough to keep showing up and realize that, okay, I had this calling. I'm going to follow through with this calling my life. And I don't know what it means right now, but I started in a completely different path and got a lot of new opportunities. And anyway, I'll stop talking for a minute. Maybe you can.
Wow, that's just a testament to your ability to kind of ride the wave of life. I I have not really learned how to do that quite as well as you. At such a young age, you were able to do that. Um, I I tend to wallow a little bit longer. You just got back in there and went, well, okay, I'm
Well,
just gonna.
that was because that opportunity came at the piano bar, but it was not pretty. I mean, I was a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I kept showing up at the piano and I kept learning new songs and I kept realizing that after a while, I mean, it took me a while to regroup and to realize that it wasn't over and that I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a complete failure and that that what they said about me, not specifically, but just what I'd always heard. And, I think people disappeared because they just didn't know how to, they didn't know how to deal with it. And so, I'm lucky, I didn't completely burn out. But I did have, I consider that my first dark night of the soul.
Right.
I had a couple, but, I guess I did. I never gave up. And there were times I wanted to, and times I just numbed out and checked out. Uh, I'm sure that if you talk to people that saw me at the piano bar at that time in my life, I was probably a mess.
Mm.
They could tell you, but I did. I just, so it wasn't a smooth thing, but I definitely kept showing up and, right behind here. And I've been doing it I'm 61 now. So I've been doing this for, um, well, however many years that is, 50 years. I've lost count now. And so, like I said, I'm stubborn enough. I just keep showing up, and the universe keeps giving me opportunity. I'm so grateful to still be able to have the opportunities to share my music, to work I think a lot of the songs that I wrote over my life were for me, and they also were sometimes they were written because I couldn't have the conversation. I didn't know how to say it any other way than to write a song about it. So, I'm just a singer-songwriter that won't quit.
That's amazing. I love that. I think the part that really struck me, at least for me, because I can relate to it, mostly now, again, I'm a late bloom. I'm not an early bloomer like you. You like bloomed and keep blooming, but um, that you had this ministry, and even though it looked different, it wasn't in the package that you thought that you grew up thinking it would be, but you knew that there was still a ministry even at the clubs. You knew that you still had something within you to give to whoever was listening. And I find that fascinating because I really do believe that wherever we go, that is our ministry or our mission, wherever we go, whatever we do. And that you knew that at such a young age. That even though, because I remember personally, and we've had this conversation, I felt catapulted out of the church about the same age you were, but it was for different reasons. And I was lost for years. I would sing here and there, but I didn't even know how to write songs anymore. If I wasn't writing about Jesus, how could I write? I was so confused because I thought the only reason I could write was because of Jesus. So I had to write about him. So when the church didn't want me, I was like, I don't even know what to do with this thing.
Yeah. I
It
can relate
took me
to
a
that.
long time.
I can relate to that because I didn't write a song for a long time either, and it was the same thing. I'm like, what do I write about now? I know what is in my heart and what my understanding of God
Right.
and Jesus, which was always different. I remember when I was 16 and my dad um, designed a business card for me, and he was an architect and it was an artist as well. So he like did the whole, he did a little logo and the business card. But I remember saying, it would have been typical to just say contemporary Christian artist. And I didn't, I remember at 16, I'm like, I don't want it to say contemporary Christian music because that seems limiting to me. So can we say like contemporary gospel? Because to me, gospel meant good news. And that was what I was about. And it's kind of interesting looking back as a 16-year-old that I didn't want that label. And I didn't know what my life was going to be or what was going to happen. But I was really young when I realized, okay, this is, uh, I see now some of the value of being brought up that way. But I knew that it felt limiting to me, even at that age.
That's interesting.
Um, Yeah. So then when I lived in New York and then I moved to California. Um, I moved to Venice Beach and that's when I met you, I think.
That is when you met me, but I
I don't
just
think
don't.
I met you.
I think it was through Harriet Shock, but I'm not positive.
I think so. And that was,
Somehow.
Harriet was like really instrumental uh in getting me to start writing music again because I had not written a song. I didn't even have a keyboard my partner at the time was like, "What do you mean you don't have a keyboard?" I would use the piano at the piano bar for everything, and that's
Wow.
what
How
I
did you
played.
practice?
I just kind of maybe practiced on the fly when I mean, I
Wow.
think there were places that I could go. I think I had a friend that had a piano, but I lost, I lost everything pretty much. And I was on my own and I didn't really reach back out to my family because I knew that I thought I knew, I guess, what they wanted me to be and that I wasn't that. And I was not going to, um, I just couldn't go back. I couldn't really face that. And so yeah, but when I met him, I didn't have a keyboard, but he convinced me you got to have a keyboard. And after a while, I mean, I was in Dallas and I had grown up in Texas. I went to Baylor University. So my whole life was just Baptist people. And then I came out and then it was like, then there were the piano bar. And that became my family. All those people, I love them because I realized that life wasn't over and that also my relationships and my friendships weren't over either. I wasn't like such a weird person that I couldn't, um, find other people that I could relate to and that I could be friends with and that would become family to me. Um, he said, we were talking one day and he goes, you really need to get out of here. I have a friend that lives in Venice, California. Let's load up the U-Haul and go. We were both just kind of in that place. And so we did. We loaded up the U-Haul and we drove to Venice and stayed with a friend of his for a couple of weeks until we found our own apartment. Um, but I hadn't written a song. And I don't know if you introduced me to Harriet, but I met Harriet and I know that you're connected with that in some way. Um, and I took a workshop from her and wrote my first song when I got out to my first song it had probably been like 8 or 10 years since I'd written a song. I'd played a lot of covers and I'd played a lot of music and I'd done a lot of stuff. And I realized, I left that trio and the life in New York pretty abruptly. And it was just a gut feeling that I had. And I have a feeling had I stayed, I probably would have burned out. I don't know if I'd still be here, just with the way my life was at the time. But I kind of really started to regroup when I got to Venice Beach and I had enough space then I could find myself and figure out who I was instead of who I thought I was supposed to be or who other people thought I was supposed to be or said I was supposed to be. Um, and life started over. And we lived right on the beach and it was a really beautiful time. I started singing country, then continuing to show up. I took this songwriting class and started writing songs again and then met Marty Rifkin and I sang country songwriter demos for him for 4 or 5 years while I lived there and just always kept looking for opportunity and I just and sometimes not even looking but then just opportunity found me um, musically musically my life and it sounds like life was just lovely and I just kind of bounced right back and it's not true. I went through I had in my personal life was kind of insane for a while and I started he introduced Carrie was my partner's name. He had a book called The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh and simple things like um, washing dishes. If you're going to wash the dish, then just wash the dish. Don't do anything else but wash the dish. And learning to just kind of bring my life down to just simple things of um, it didn't have to be so serious. It didn't have to be so traumatic. I could relax a little bit and realize that I had not lost my salvation. I had not lost the love of God. and learning all those things, it was difficult. You go through. I remember when I met you, and you had similar experiences with Christianity and with churches that had nothing to do with being gay, and you were one of the first people that I really connected with uh, that had that, but was not gay. It wasn't anything, it wasn't like that. You just had your own journey of it just not working for you anymore, you know?
Well, I
I,
at this point in my life, I feel like we all have our own religion, if we want to call it a religion. We all have our own spiritual journey, and nobody's a guru or the boss of it, or, because if I think about my parents, they had 7 children, and each child has a different parent and different relationship with those parents. And that's 7 kids, not billions. But I think we all learn about God our own way, about our spirituality our own way, because we have different inner workings, different experiences, different things that we're thinking, and different gifts. And all I want to do with this show, this podcast, is to let people know what other people's experiences are in life and how we gained tools and ways to get through it. And the thing is, our way might not work for you, but it's a tool we learned, and maybe one of our tools that we learned will work for you. But we
yeah,
just want to encourage people that being yourself and sticking with you will take you down your road.
absolutely. I came full circle with Christianity and my relationship with Jesus after a lot of time when I've always gone to bookstores, and for the longest time, not anymore because there's really not many bookstores left. But I remember going into bookstores, and always a book would just find it would just I just it would come off the shelf at me. And there was one that I saw at one point, and it was called The Yoga of Jesus. And I was fascinated that the word yoga and Jesus were in the title of the same book from my perspective and what I had been brought up with. And on the top, I pulled the book out, and on the top of the cover, it said, "Behold, the kingdom of God is within you." And it was written by Paramahansa Yogananda. And it blew my mind. And I'm like, that's what I believed back then. That was something that I was taught as a Baptist kid, from that perspective and through that filter, that came back around to me. And I think that's the essence of, at least for me, that's the essence of what when you said people have their own religion, or we create that. Um, that's what I believe. I believe that old ancient teaching um, is really the truth of all of that, that didn't get changed by people who wanted to control people. But it was, if people really thought, oh wow, the kingdom of God is within me, the spirit of the divine is expressing itself through my life, each of us individually, it's like 8 billion times of that expression. um, that was a deal changer for me, as far as kind of being able to resolve what I had been taught, and not leave everything behind, but bring the stuff that still supported me, and that was about love and acceptance and compassion. you know
Mm-hmm.
all the things that I always thought Jesus was, um, but didn't really see that in the world that I grew up in. I did a lot. And, I was the golden boy. So before I came out, I had all the support I could ever need. And that was a hard thing for me, because I got all that, uh, all the praise and the oh, look at, a lot of it, look at this young kid that's playing, playing. Sometimes I felt like, I remember at times in my life, I was like, well, I wonder if people just like me because I can sing and I can do this thing. And if, oh, let's look, okay, here's Gary, watch him do this, this trick. um, so I had to deal with that too. But anyway, I've kind of like lost on a tangent. Bring me back.
Well, I think you were going to start to go to your next Dark Night of the Soul.
Uh,
We were kind of getting there,
yeah, I
right?
was, I was, and this was a big one because it was after Venice Beach, and uh, my relationship broke up, and I came back to Dallas for a while. But I had met an attorney in LA who had taken me to Nashville while I was living in Venice Beach. And this is another thing that just kind of, I had been singing these country music demos. Once again, it's like showing up in life, and you get an opportunity came, and I met Owen, and he said, let's go to Nashville. I mean, he was one of those guys that knew everybody. And so I went to Nashville with Owen and my keyboard. And I played for every president of every label. And that's not it's not literal, but I'd probably like 8 or 10 presidents of the labels go into their office and play, and they sat and listened. And I remember one that just completely didn't get me, that was like a guy in overalls, and in the middle of the song, I'm like doing this audition. In the middle of the song, he gets up and walks out of the room. Like, oh wow, okay. But the thing was, though, so then I had to deal with the fact that, okay, now I've played for everybody in Nashville that could do something. And um and I got a couple of nibbles. And so when my relationship broke up, uh I was like, okay, then I got to get to Nashville. I'll go to Nashville and get in line. That's what
Makes
they told me.
sense. Makes sense, right?
It's not um I realized that okay, well, I wasn't just going to go into someone's office and play, and it wasn't going to be one of those things where they go, oh my God, we got to sign you today. Which they're, in the back of your head, you kind of hope that that's the thing, but it didn't happen. And so I went back to Dallas, packed up everything again, didn't have much, and I moved to Nashville. And I got in line. The thing about going to Nashville, though, at that point, though, is I kind of, I felt like I had to go back in the closet, because they were, it was in 2000. And really, it's not that much different now in Nashville. They've become a little bit more open to LGBTQ community, but not a whole lot. And this was 20 years ago. And so that was not going to be, an openly gay country artist. And I wasn't really a country artist either, but I was just kind of showing up, trying to see what I could make work and make happen. And then nothing happened with that. And so I wound up at a temp job in IBM basement with fluorescent lights, I just doing this horrible job. And what I didn't realize, when I went back to Dallas, I was playing some of the clubs that I played earlier on, and you could play and get paid. And, it was kind of like making not a great living, but I was getting by and being able to pay my bills. And then when I got to Nashville, not really doing my research, and realized that, oh, well, no, you don't get paid. There's not a gig that's going to pay, because there's so many people here that want to be heard. I didn't know that. So Nashville was not all that great for me. And so I kind of fell back into a dark hole again, of trying to figure out now, okay, well, now what? Okay, so people have heard me. that could do something, and nothing's happened. And so then, and at that time, I was just kind of like trying to figure out how to keep showing up, um, and really feeling like a failure at that point. And so I just started, I wasn't taking care of myself. And this part, I don't think you know, but I got meningitis, and I didn't know I had meningitis. I was still working with a company in Dallas that did corporate shows. That was another side gig that I did, where, you sing for Southwest Airlines or American Express, and you're like have on a glitter vest and you're out on stage singing. You know, it's not the most artistic thing, but it is decent money, and I'm very grateful for that. For that time and that company that helped me through a lot of things. But I had been getting sick, and I had a cough, and I was not feeling well. And I had a gig back in Dallas. They were flying me in to do this show. And I got to Dallas, and I had such a headache on the plane back. And my mom, bless her, after all of our life together and just the separation that we had, and just not really being very close, but she was always my mom, and she, never turned. I mean, she didn't know how to deal with me and being gay, but she never turned her back on me, and she would have always been there for me had I ever reached out. And this was a time I just reached out, and I was staying with her, and in the middle of the night, I said, I think you need to take me to the emergency room. I really am. I don't think I'm well. And she took me, and I had spinal meningitis.
Wow.
And I spent and I was really, really, really sick, like close to, I don't think I look at my life now kind of being in the bonus round, because had that gig not come, I wouldn't have gone to a doctor probably in Nashville. I didn't have insurance. There was nothing. So I kind of like hit the bottom then. And I, once again, lost everything. I wound up back at my mom's. I lived with her for a while. I got my strength back enough to where I started playing the clubs a little bit. And then I met my friend Denise Lee. You met Denise, and the
Yes,
Hideaway.
yes.
We've been to the Hideaway because
Yeah.
we did that tour together. We wound up at the Hideaway. And Denise says, and this is how just kind of magical moments of life that I feel very grateful for. And telling the story and telling you about it, it kind of occurs to me that these crazy magical things kind of in the midst of the darkest times have an opportunity to come. And she said, there's a show called Pump Boys and Dinettes, and they're having auditions, and one of the roles is LM, and he's the music director. He's the music director. I wasn't the music director, but he's the piano player in the show. Guys that work in the gas station, and the two sisters that have the diner across the street, across the highway. It's a really fun show. But she said, you ought to go audition. Okay, cool. I'll go audition. And so I went and auditioned, and I got the role. And they had a thing called the Rabin Awards in Dallas, and I won for supporting actor in a musical. And then it opened doors I did probably the next 10 years of musical theater that I hadn't done musical theater since I was in high school. And it never really even occurred to me. But because I got so sick and I wound up back in Dallas, this new path opened up. And so then I started I just did, I don't know how many shows. I kind of like I was 40. I was 40, but I was kind of like the new it boy I was kind of new to that world. And so I started doing that, and again, got a lot of opportunity to to do a lot of cool shows, and spent the next 10 years doing that. And so that was another time when I thought, and I thought life might be over. I mean, I thought I was uh, maybe gonna check out, or could have checked out, to realize how close it could have been if I hadn't gone back to Dallas for that show, and you know, wound up in the ER. And so I look at that moment of, and I remember laying in the ER, and they came and said, you got spinal meningitis. We're going to check you in. You're sick. These are your levels, your blood levels. And you're not going anywhere. And, but I remember laying there before they took me to a room, and I was like, life is temporary. We are not in these bodies forever. That's not what they're meant for. But I remember thinking, something's going to take me out one day, but this isn't it.
You just knew.
This isn't it. And that was my mindset. And so I just laid there for almost a month in the hospital and couldn't do anything. I just laid there and never thought I was actually not going to make it, but I could have. But my mind said, this isn't it. So chill out, regroup, get yourself back together, and yeah. So that was like number two. I don't think I want three. But through that, so like I got back to Dallas, and then a friend of mine that was also playing in the piano bars, and I didn't know that he was also a music director at a spiritual community called Center for Spiritual Living Dallas. I knew him from the piano bar, and he would come up to me and say, hey, Gary, would you fill in for me on Sunday? And I'd say, no. If it's a church, I'm not going. I would not.
Right.
I had I just didn't have any desire to go back into that world. He kept asking. And so finally it was like $50 for the Sunday, it's like nothing, but I was playing, I was making my life and piecing together all the things that I did to make it work. And that particular week, I just like, oh, I could use that $50. Okay, I'll go. And
what did you play? That's the thing.
God, I don't even
Were you
remember
freaked
what
out
I played,
about
because it wasn't
kind
like, Centers for Spiritual Living is not like the Baptist Christian
Right.
church that I grew up in. They're like progressive Christianity a little bit, but still it's like it's not the same. So I don't know what I played, but I do know that I had been playing piano bars for so long that, I'm wallpaper at that point. People are they love what you do. They're tipping, they requesting songs. They're kind of listening, but it's a whole different world. And I remember the first time that I went back, and I'm like, oh my God, everybody's looking at me. What do I do now?
It's
They're
a real
looking.
audience.
Don't look at me. So, but I filled in for him. And then, so I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I like the band, and I like the vibe of the people. And so when he would go out of town, I would fill in for him. And then he wound up leaving, and they asked me to play piano there. I wasn't the music director, but just kind of like be in the band. And so then that became a gig. And I began to kind of like get this idea of another level of spirituality that I could dive into, which was kingdom God's within you. This is, you are coming from the place of God expressing itself through you and through your life, just like it was in Jesus, and just like it was in Buddha, and just like, it's that same spirit. And then I met my partner now, Danny, and we started dating. And he said, what's this church that you're playing? Because he knew me from the piano bars and from musical theater. And so he was like, what's this church? And I said, Center for Spiritual Living. And well, come to find out, in the late 80s, he had been in this community. They have things called practitioners, which are kind of like prayer practitioners. In my world, in Southern Baptist, it would be like a deacon, or, like people that are in the church that are there to pray for people. And he had been in training for that back in the 80s. And so he didn't quite know. Center for Spiritual Living was the new name of this group. And when he figured out who it was, he's like, oh, hold on a minute. And he went and he got a book called This Thing Called You by Ernest Holmes. And I started reading it, and I couldn't believe the guy that I was dating actually knew this and gave me this book. And I was blown away. I found a spirituality again that worked for me, and started writing. Then I started writing, I'd been writing songs, and a lot of the songs that I wrote in Venice Beach and Nashville were love songs and songs about what I was going through. I did a whole album about the relationship that I was in Venice. It's called This Side of Goodbye, because I was the one that was left in that relationship, and that had never happened to me before. So I wrote my way through it. That music, in so many ways in my life, saved me, because I was able to write songs about what I was going through and sing them. And I think just that practice of getting it out, even though I couldn't, my throat chakra in other ways was just probably completely shut down, trying to communicate with people other than singing songs and writing them. So then I started writing, it's kind of weird full circle, because then I began to kind of write spiritual songs from a different perspective, and that's what I'm doing now. And so like it's kind of like every 10 years something happens, and I kind of shift gears. But I have, I just have kept showing up and be grateful for the opportunities. And, I do realize, I'm in my 60s now, and I know that's not old. It sure seemed old to me, when I was 30, if you look at people that are in their 60s. But so I know that not only is my body it's temporary and not meant to last forever. My spirit lasts forever, I believe, but not my body or my personality as Gary right now. But and so because of that, I do know that there will come a time when people are not like, oh, come sing for us more. I'm going to be the guy that they're going to have to pull off the piano or something. But, that time, I'll just kind of cross that bridge when I get to it. But I'm so grateful that I still have the opportunity to write and play and sing music, and that I kept showing up. I can pat myself on the back a little bit, because I never let it completely destroy or stop me from believing that there was something more that I was put here to do. I think I feel the same with your music. I love that song that you have, Late Bloomers. That's one of my favorite ones, because I feel the same way. Even though I got that, I had that early on in my life, I always have felt like it never really, I was kind of like the bud the whole time, and that I haven't really bloomed fully the way that I could have, maybe. Um,
Had you stayed
but
had
I
you
don't let
stayed in
it
your
stop.
original lane? If you had
Yeah,
stayed in your
that would
original
have been a
lane,
disaster.
that would have
I
been.
look back at that, and it would have been a disaster. Had I not been outed, I don't know how long it would have taken. I was engaged in college. Oh, look. There's do you have that on
What is
yours?
that bubble coming up?
It's my thumb. Well, I went like this, and it
It
thinks that I'm
copied it.
thumbs up.
It thinks that. Oh, so it's.
Mine does the heart. Well, there, look. I don't know
That's
how that
awesome.
does it.
It's
I
time
didn't do
for
it on
that.
purpose, but
That's awesome. I didn't even know that did that. That's pretty
um,
cool.
Where was I? Or what have I just been blabbing the
No,
whole
this is great. I think that hearing this story, the twists and turns and how you hung in there for yourself is pretty incredible. For me, watching you and knowing you as long as I have and hearing more of your story, you are a greatness magnet, I guess. You know that you get pulled to the top of everywhere you go. When I was in college, I went to Bible college also. But when I was in college, I had a professor that said, cream always rises to the top.
time.
And that happens with you every time. Wherever you go, you rise to the top. And it's really wonderful to see, but I know kind of why. And except that there's this intangible thing about you. When you perform, when you're singing one of your songs, someone else's songs, it doesn't matter. And I've told you this before, and I've said it, you probably heard me say it 20, 30 times. But there is something, your voice is such a pure pitch. It's just like hits the pocket. And I think that is healing in itself, just for, because they have pitch therapy and, they use tone to heal people. So that right there, makes a person comfortable. And I've, paid attention to performers. And when someone's pitch is on as accurately as yours is, the audience can relax and take in whatever you give them. When somebody's pitch is a little, and I'm not saying anything bad about those people, because there's artists out there who just sing from their heart and it's beautiful and it's creative and it's wonderful. But I'm just talking about you right now. So, so I'm not putting them down. But anyway, so when pitch is a little bit off or about ready to go off, the audience is a little nervous, even if they don't know what pitch is or what they're hearing. But for you, you make everyone comfortable because you're so comfortable when you're up there. It's like you were made to sit there and do that. That's one part of it. The other part, it's like the tone or your delivery or your clean vessel coming out. It's like the angels just literally show up when you start singing. And everyone's like, okay, the angels are here now. And
Wow.
I don't care what song you sing. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what the lyrics are or what it is. There's just something about the vessel of you when that tone comes out that it changes the atmosphere.
Mm, Thank you.
And Christian music really lost out when they rejected you. And I'm just going to add this little thing that I've had in my mind for a while. There are churches that accept certain people and there are churches that don't accept certain people. And it could be any category, right? We're not going to name a category of non-accepted people. And so I picture this person with a clipboard at the front of the church. And on the clipboard, it has all these sins. They're all listed. But you can't get into the church unless you pass not committing any of those sins. And so the people are standing in line and they're all being turned away. Every single person is being turned away, and the person with the clipboard is the last one to leave because they know.
Wow.
And so in my opinion, with the experience I've had in life thus far, if somebody wants to come to your church and they are seeking a spiritual life, let them in the door, because who are you to say? And none of us could pass that clipboard test.
Yeah.
None of us. Not one person I've ever met. And not that I'm judging anyone, because we're not supposed to do that, right?
Well, that's because what's on the clipboard is made up by humans.
Right.
God did not create the clipboard, you know? And I think Christianity is in the midst of come to Jesus moment. for lack of a better phrase. But I think that I meet people all the time that have been, and not just because, because my journey was being gay and being not, what do you call, not disfellowshipped, but like just not welcome. And
Discommunicated? I don't know.
um,
What?
I could have gone back, but then I would have had to be
Excommunicated.
what,
Yes.
yeah, but I would have had to be, um, I don't know, I would have had to be what their definition of acceptable is. And I just think that's got a shelf life on it. It's not something that is um, sustainable much longer. It just feels like it's kind of been turned on its head, and which is a good thing, I think. It's got a lot of people are deconstructing it and are coming to the place where they realize that the essence of it and the essence of the teachings of Jesus have nothing to do with the theology and the dogma and the doctrine that has been created to, in my opinion, to control people. You know, maybe we needed it for a while, but I just think that who am I to say? I'll just I'll just keep writing my songs and singing as long as people will listen. And should I have another dark night of the soul, I'll call you up.
You better.
What
I
do I do now? This is my third one. No,
You better call me.
I don't think there'll be one, but life is weird.
It is.
Thing can happen, good or bad.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
and the things that feel like they were the worst things for me and the worst thing that's happened, uh, I can look back now from the perspective that I'm in and realize that sometimes it was like the best thing that could have happened was for me to be outed, because then I did not have to go any further into that career, really, because it would have eventually blown up at some point, you know,
Yeah. Living a lie is tough.
and I wouldn't have known, I didn't know what to do when it did blow up, but had it been bigger, then, just, you never know. It's like, um, yeah, anything can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and you just roll with what happens and do the best you can. And I have been blessed. I have also been at the bottom of, um, I've just been torn up too. So it hasn't all been great. And you say I've risen to the top, and I always compare myself to the people who, in my opinion, are at the top, and then I struggle with that voice a lot of, oh, you just didn't do it. And but then I look at all of the opportunity that I have had and that I continue to have, and have to remind myself to be grateful for just be grateful for everything that is in my life, and not to judge myself for thinking that I should be something that I'm not. I mean, I did that. I think I've been thinking a lot lately. I think a lot of my drive in my career um, was to prove that I was acceptable, or try to get the acceptance of either my parents or the tribe that I was in that didn't accept me anymore. And part of, be it good or bad, part of my drive was to be accepted. You know, I think I don't think that was the only thing that moved me, but I think that if I look back, oh God, I probably was just trying to be okay. Just okay. If I could write the best song, if I could write another song that might, but then now I look and I'm like, if I can write a song that moves people, moves a person, um, helps them to deal with whatever they're going through, or lifts them up, or brings a smile to their face, or makes them dance a little bit, then that's what I'm here for. Then I feel like I'm fulfilling the calling that I had when I was 10 years old. And it looks totally different than I thought it would look. But I think that's what I didn't really leave myself a plan B. I didn't, I just kind of dove in and keep diving in and, hope for the best.
Well, I think what you mentioned about if it's just for one person, I think that is what it is. Even if you um, are a superstar and become that, or are recognized as that, which I think is still possible for you, I am not giving up on that for you. Um, but that connection that you make with your audiences and that they make with your songs and your voice, I think that is cream rising to the top. That is the top. Because if you're a major artist and you don't have that one-on-one connection because you have too many people, you can't even like fathom, you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
can literally connect with people in that way, in a deeper way. And the possibility of actually helping someone is greater for you in the position that you're in my opinion, at this point in my life with all that I know, which could change tomorrow. So ask me tomorrow. No.
Well, for me, there's nothing better than making that connection. Um, I thrive on the energy that comes back when I'm singing. And then if someone comes up and says that song moved me or helps me to kind of process and put in a different place in my mind what I'm going through, then um, yeah, then I have been blessed, and I've done my job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, I'm so glad we got to talk, and I hope you don't have a third one. I really, really do.
No, two's
But,
enough. I'm
but
done.
I would love, I know you wrote a song recently that you just put out that kind of talks about what we've been talking about. But if you wanted to like take us out playing something else,
Oh, wow. I'd love.
that'd be awesome. But if you want to find out more about Gary, go to GaryLynnFloyd.com. That's Gary, Gary, Lynn, Lynn, Floyd, FLOYD.com. GaryLynnFloyd.com.
Nice.
All right. What do
Can
you
you
want?
hear me now on this
Yes, we can
microphone?
hear you.
Do you remember you are love at the heart of your being? Do you remember there is more to this life than what you're seeing? Let me remind you, you are beautiful by far. You've nothing left to prove when you remember who you are. If you ever forget, I will help you remember who you are and who you're here to be. Sometimes it's hard to make a way through the dark, but I will see for you and help you remember who you are. Do you remember there is peace in the middle of this storm? Do you remember you have all you need inside to keep you warm? Let me remind you, you're the dust from a star. Your essence is revealed when you remember who you are. If you ever forget, I will help you remember who you are and who you're here to be. Sometimes it's hard to make a way through the dark, but I will see for you and help you remember. You are braver than you think you are, stronger than you seem. The life that lies ahead of you is like nothing you have ever seen. If you ever forget, I will help you remember who you are and who you're here to be. Sometimes it's hard to make a way through the dark, but I will see for you and help you remember. Remember who you are. Remember who you are. Yeah.
Gary Floyd.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Love you.
I love you too.